Hello and welcome to another video in the series, the Deep Dive Conversations from Southwest Grid for Learning. And today I'm joined by my colleague from Southwest Grid, Sophie Mortimer. And today we're going to be speaking about revenge porn, RP, that we abbreviate. Now, Sophie, it's a terrible phrase, and I guess there are alternative phrases for it as well, but what is RP and why have we called it revenge porn? Is it about revenge and is it about porn?
No, it absolutely isn't about either of those things. So we do try to refer to it as intimate image abuse, which would be the use of intimate images in order to abuse, humiliate, embarrass, intimidate somebody else.
And these are intimate images that somebody has consensually created in the first instance?
They can be. They can be consensually created within relationships, but they can also be taken without the knowledge of one of the parties. That is something that we see quite commonly.
Right. And is it common?
Yes, it is. It's also against the law to take those images without the consent of one of the parties. So it's a rising problem. We all have this amazing technology in our pockets these days that we can do incredible things with, and sometimes there's a temptation to do things that possibly people shouldn't do.
So there's a conversation, isn't there, to be had around this whole idea that if you want to avoid being the victim of revenge porn, don't take intimate images in the first place. What's your view on that?
I would turn that around. I think people are perfectly entitled to take that sort of content if that's what they want to do. They're not the people doing something wrong. The wrong behaviour is in sharing that content without consent, with creating that content without consent.
And the intent.
The intent, and that's absolutely where we should be looking. We need to look at the intent of perpetrators, not of victims. They're not the people in the wrong.
So what does this look like when it's happened? I know you can't give examples because they're intensely private and sensitive areas, but what might this look like in a sort of typical scenario? We've been using this phrase, revenge porn. We carry on using revenge porn, or would you prefer us to be talking about intimate image abuse?
We always talk about intimate image abuse, despite the name of the helpline. Unfortunately, it is how people find us by searching that phrase.
It's a phrase the media drove, wasn't it?
Absolutely, it is self-perpetuating, and I realise that we are part of that problem. But while people are using it to find us, it's a bit sticky trying to shift it.
It's the outcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what might I balk at the use of the phrase typical, but how might this look like in a scenario, or perhaps some of the things that you've dealt with, the type of things that you've dealt with?
Every case is absolutely different, as you can clearly see, but there are behaviours that we see again and again, and a lot of that is relationship breakdown. One party has intimate images of the other, and in a lashing out possibly, or as an extension of a controlling or abusive relationship, chooses either to share those intimate images with a wider audience than was ever originally intended, or to threaten to share. That's a behaviour that we see quite commonly in abusive relationships, or that have been abusive relationships, where people will use the threat to share those images to get a particular outcome, to get compliance from a previous partner, which might be about money or childcare,
so almost
any
like
sort
a coercive
of
or sextortion.
Absolutely, it's part of a coercive behaviour, and it doesn't happen in isolation.
So we think of this, don't we? I mean, generally speaking, as something that happens to women. But is it exclusively something that happens to women, or are you beginning to see patterns and trends?
The numbers are pretty constant. It predominantly happens to women by men, but that's not exclusively so by any means. Of the sorts of intimate image abuse that we're talking about 70% of our victims are women and the perpetrators are men, but that does leave a solid 25 to 30% of other dynamics.
Yeah, where it's other people and under the same circumstances. And
similar, yes.
Yeah, and so when you're talking to these people and helping through, what's the impact of this in terms of how it affects their mental health, their well-being, their lives, their jobs, their standing, social standing, their relationships with their family?
Absolutely devastating. This can impact on every area of somebody's life. People report damaged relationships with close family and friends. Jobs, if images are circulated around workplaces, which happens unfortunately fairly commonly, people have lost jobs or they felt humiliated or denigrated at work. And then there's an economic impact, or if images are shared in your community, the parents at the school gate. People often say to us that they're scared to leave the house, because if you know your images are out there, flip that around. Because somebody can see them, you don't know that they haven't. So people will say, I can't go to my local shop because I don't know whether the man in the shop has seen my images. And that's a real emotional burden.
There's a real host of issues here then. It's very multi-layered. We very often think about supporting the victim and removing that content and being able to reduce the visibility of that content to protect them. But isn't there another layer around sort of all of these issues that you mentioned sort of emanate from a sort of blame culture around it, you know? So there seems to be all of these other things that you blame, you did this, it's your fault. You know?
I think that's the default position that people, that victims who come to us are reported, that their family and their friends and the police will say to them, well, you shouldn't have taken that in the first place.
Yeah. And
that's not the point.
And that you're viewed as less of a person because you've done that, whereas it's just your right and maybe part of a normal, healthy, vibrant sexual relationship.
Absolutely, and who are we to say that it's not? And that is where the phrase revenge porn does come into play. That word revenge does imply that somebody has done something wrong and in some level deserves what's happened to them, and that is absolutely not the case.
So right at the top you mentioned the law, that it's illegal to do this. What law do we have here in the UK in terms of protecting anyone who's the victim of revenge porn, and certainly, you know, and the implication for perpetrators?
We do have a law. It came in 2015. I think it's fair to say that it's imperfect and is happily now under review by the Law Commission. It is against the law to share somebody's intimate images without their consent in order to cause them distress. There are a number of limitations in there. So there is definition of a private image, which so the level of nudity or what is depicted is quite narrowly prescribed by the law. So a lot of things that will cause a lot of distress and that many of us would consider private might not be covered by the law as it stands.
If people wanted to go and research that law is?
It's the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015, section 33.
Right, okay, you have it there. Look, you have no excuse not to go and research this and have a look yourself. One
important thing that isn't actually covered under that law is threats to share. And as I said before, that's just something that we're seeing an awful lot of within the controlling relationships.
So that doesn't quite sit underneath that law, and it is a type of revenge porn, because whilst those intimate images are in the possession of somebody else, there is a coercion, almost a sextortion angle to it, and is that against the law, to threaten?
It has been shoehorned into the sentencing guidelines of a communications offence. So it can be done, but it is quite tricky. It is not explicitly against the law as its own separate criminal offence.
There's another phrase that I dread to use, but it's the phrase that people are using, and certainly within the media, this phrase upskirting. Now this doesn't quite sit as comfortably in with the work that you do, but it's on those similar lines. It has similar threads, doesn't it, into the work that you do. Can you just explain what upskirting is and whether there's any law that protects?
There is now a law against upskirting. Last year there was an amendment made to the Voyeurism Act, which made it an offence to take images under somebody's clothing in a public place, which was not previously really against the law.
And is that what we mean by upskirting?
That is what we mean by upskirting. So that might be somebody at a concert or a festival or on an underground train,
so without their
knowledge, and certainly without their consent. So that is now against the law. That is under voyeurism.
Difficult to prosecute or prove?
As yet there are no prosecutions in England, and a handful in Scotland where it has been against the law for a lot longer.
And the incidence, the frequency of those sort of images emerging?
It seems very common. Certainly from the work that we do looking at adult sites, there are frequently categories of these sorts of images. So I think it is prevalent. Again, it's that very powerful tool that we all carry around in our hands.
So you mentioned adult sites. You've mentioned that there are laws there to protect people. What's industry's role in this?
industry definitely has a role to play. They need to accept responsibility for this content and be proactive in preventing it and for hosting it and removing it. Social media sites, as a rule, are generally very supportive. For us, the work that we do, the images that we are dealing with, they are against the law. So those sites are very proactive in removing them. We have over the years built good relationships with the adult industry, and as a general rule we find them very supportive in the mainstream. There are some extreme sites who don't cooperate, so we will never be able to say we can, until there's a technological solution at least, we won't be able to say we can always get things down, but we do have a really high
And that connection with the industry is important actually to support the work of the helpline. So I think it's fair to say you lead on this here at Southwest Grid for Learning. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the work of the helpline, how it originated? Because it's quite unique, isn't it? Is there another helpline in the world that does this exclusively in the way that we do here at Southwest Grid?
Not really, not exclusively. There is no other organisation or helpline in Europe that is supporting victims of this behaviour. There is one in America, and there are organisations in Australia and New Zealand, but they are dealing with a wider range of online abuse issues. So there aren't many of us at all. So yes, we're a little bit lonely, but doing our best to talk to our colleagues around the world. So the helpline was established in 2015, just ahead of the law coming in. It grew out of the work of the Professionals Online Safety Helpline, which supports the children's workforce. They've had a number of issues of contacts from teachers who were having intimate images shared and who were being blamed by their employers, by those schools, and people were losing their jobs. So that's where it originally came from.
And we have to give a shout out, do we not, to our colleague Laura Higgins.
A big one.
Who was the progenitor, the originator of taking this particular aspect and growing it more, getting it government, influencing the law, influencing people taking this seriously.
She's the heroine in this story, definitely.
She is. So if you're watching this, Laura, checks in the post, please. Thank you very much. That'd be very nice. How big is your team?
There are 3 of us. We're not all full-time. We're equal about 2.5 people. So we're a tiny team. And working at pretty much full capacity, I would say. We get busier and busier. We've just had our busiest month ever by a long way.
What's that look like, number of calls?
That's almost 180 cases we had last month, and that's probably that must be about 700 contacts.
So the prevalence of this is real, isn't it? It's obviously huge. Affecting people's lives and stuff, which brings me to that bit around, so here we are, we're quite a unique team, we're based here in Exeter, and then the beautiful West Country down here at the bottom of the UK, all clotted cream and cows. It's a beautiful place to be. How do we manage then to ensure that such a valuable service, we know it's a valuable service because the volume of calls we take and the things that we're involved in, how do we ensure that is sustained? How is it sustained currently at the moment?
We're currently funded by the Home Office. They have, the government have funded us through Home Office and Government Equalities Office from the beginning, and we certainly appreciate their support, but it doesn't cover everything that we do.
It hasn't always been like that though, has it? There were times when we thought the helpline wouldn't actually survive.
It's been touch and go,
definitely.
Absolutely. But fortunately they saw the light and they've continued to support us, and we now are at the beginning of a 3-year cycle, so we hope to have we've got a bit of stability going forward. We also have had some donations from industry to help support the work that we do. And then it's a round of applying for funding, applying for grants to try and make us more sustainable, to build the technology that we're using to try and reduce the burden on the human part of the team.
Sophie, it's an amazing and valuable service. If people want to get in touch with you or feel the need to be able to call you, what sort of contact details? So some of them will appear here on the screen behind us, but what should people do?
Our website is revengepornhelpline.org.uk. You can call us on 0345 6000 459, or you can email us on help@revengepornhelpline.org.uk. We're open Monday to Friday from 10 till 4.
Ideal. And one parting shot. If somebody out there currently at the moment is feeling the pressure and is a victim of these heinous and horrid behaviours, which we know are illegal, what would be your advice to them?
Call us. You're not on your own and we can help.
Amazing. Sophie, thanks very much for your time. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks, Ken.
And thank you very much for joining us too. Take care, we'll see you again.